This is a painting flowers on location watercolour demonstration by Hales. To paint flowers, you need to find the pattern for each type of flower and use the background for maximum effect. You need to create interesting greens in your foliage, and there are challenges when working on site. This was my inspiration, flowers spilling across the steps in the backyard. Two different kinds of flowers, verbena, which are multi-floreted clusters, so I create a variety of tone for these little flowers to get the form of the group. The alströmerias are quite different, and for them I want some flashes of colour, and then I want a crisp edge to give them the flounce that they have. When painting these crisp edges, I keep the point of my brush against the flower, and I vary the background edge so that there isn't a hard line outside the flower itself. I always keep the tip of my brush against the flowers when I'm working. It doesn't matter which way I'm holding it, I keep the tip against the flowers themselves. And these are the two flowers that I'm going to paint in this demonstration. I'm also going to look at some of the details in order to create each one of these two different kinds of flowers easily. Some stripes on the petals and on the throat, and that will give me the sense of the alströmerias. I'm going to hone in and just do the flowers up close against a little bit of pavement. And this started just with patches of colour where the flowers would be, and I'm going to flood a strong dark on the left-hand side for the pavement itself. This is done with ultramarine, burnt sienna and rose madder, and the colours are mixing in a fairly thick, rich wash on the paper. This creates interest in what could be a very bland, uninteresting element of my painting. The colours mix, and I don't pay too much attention to what I'm doing here, except when I get closer to the flower edges, where I want crisp definition to work for me later. Now I'm just going to draw a few edges on my alströmerias for when I flood in the green foliage. And here I'm mixing mostly on the paper, dropping the colours in and letting them create a continual varying colour in the foliage. I just use a few brush strokes to indicate the kind of foliage without defining it too much. The only definition I'm really looking for is against the flowers themselves. And here it is, it's raining. That's painting on location for you. Crisp edges against these flowers and little patches of green that break the flowers up and carry your eye through the design. There is no detail yet, but there is crispness where I need it. And these are the colours I'm using for this painting, and indeed for most of my paintings. Most of the colours are Winsor & Newton, with the exception being the rose madder. More foliage. In fact, I paint more on the foliage when I'm painting flowers than I do on the flowers themselves, because the foliage is the support for the flowers. And you can see I'm putting a shadow across the step, and I'm carrying some darks up through the design. I'm not in a hurry here. I want to get maximum impact for the marks that I'm making in this area. And now the sun's come out, casting heavy shadows on the page. A few little touches here, breaking up these spaces where the flowers will be, and a lot of attention to detail on the edges in order to keep the outside edge interesting. And I make sure I vary the colour around the edges of the flowers so that they are not totally held in. They can escape here and there. And I'm back to the verbena now, and the marks on these flowers are quite different, so I'm just moving the brush and dotting and dashing to indicate the busyness of these flower groups. Very little painting is actually done on the flowers themselves. Most of it is done with the foliage. The depth is used underneath the flowers and through the design to carry your eye. And then I add a few details on the flowers to indicate what kind they are. But there's not really a lot of painting on the flowers themselves. And my finished product is a lovely fresh interpretation of flowers spilling across the step. If you want to see more flower paintings or painting on plein air, check out these two ebooks.